I'll Okay. Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? My name's Dan Hewitt. I'm a political reporter for ITV News. I've been covering politics in the Northwest for about 7 years. Recently moved down to Westminster, but I'm back and forth to the North all the time. Know Oldham really well. Remember covering the Oldham Western Royton by-election here and spending 3 weeks driving around in cabs, speaking to local cab drivers about the local area, so I learned as much as I could about Oldham. One of them was that it's got the largest town in the UK without a cinema. Is that still the case? No. There you go. Who says politics doesn't work, eh?
I think we can both confirm as well, this is the hottest we've ever been in Oldham, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, absolutely, yeah.
It's normally freezing.
Yeah, it's normally colder up north, but there you go, it's not all clean up today. So this obviously is the, you can see, Mayor of Greater Manchester question time, Ask Andy event. Obviously you guys have all come along to ask Andy as many questions as we can fit in the next hour and a half. We will try and do that between now and 9 o'clock. Some of you have sent questions in. Just to let you know, the questions were sent in and sent to me. The Mayor's office haven't filtered them, haven't looked at them. I've come straight to me. I've then pick a few out. I'll read some out from the social media contributions we get, some from this piece of paper, and some from you in the audience. When we're on a topic, once Andy's asked the question, I'll open it out to you guys. If we can try and keep it broadly on that topic for each as we go through, rather than veering from one to the other, that would be great. But we'll start off. Can I ask if, first of all, if Peter Briggs is here, please? Is Peter Briggs here? Yeah. You are. Can you have your question first, please, Peter?
Mr. Burnham, as you sought election to be mayor on a platform of safeguarding our greenbelt, what steps are you now taking to preserve our precious greenbelt in Chadderton, in what is our last large green space apart from sports fields? How can you reconcile the proposed building of warehouses with your aims to reduce pollution? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. I did stand for election on that ticket, and the redrafted spatial framework, the one that came out earlier this year, has cut the greenbelt take by over half. So I did ask all 10 districts to look at the position with regard to greenbelt, and we managed a substantial reduction when you look across all of the 10 boroughs. Now, that isn't to say, though, that in every place it's come up with something that is obviously supported by all of those communities. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm still listening, and we're still considering the responses to the consultation, the things that people have said, and there'll be a further consultation on the next revised draft. So, we are constantly looking at this. We're trying to find the point of balance. It's not easy. The government has required us effectively to use higher housing figures. I had asked the team to use the more recent projections that the ONS came out until the government said we had to go with the 2014 figures. So I have been trying to reduce the greenbelt take as far as I possibly can. To answer the final bit of your question, how can I reconcile it with the need to cut pollution? Well, the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework also sets a date of 2028 for zero carbon development. So that is quite a big statement that really nowhere else in the country has gone with something that bold. So what we're saying is, by that date, all development here needs to be zero carbon, i.e. not adding any pollution to the atmosphere. So it's a challenging process, but I continue to work at it to see if we can get this right, and in the end, save as much greenbelt as we possibly can. But I cannot ignore the pressure that's coming down upon us from the government with regard to the need to build more houses.
Peter, did you feel like that answered your question or not? Did you feel that answered your question or not? Do you want to come back? Wait for the mic if you can.
As far as Chadderton is concerned, at the moment, Chadderton's got about 25% of its land devoted to industry. Now, that's the largest percentage, I would imagine, of any township in Greater Manchester. And what you're saying, whilst we still have housing taking over the central part of the last green space in Chadderton, that's going to extinguish that. We're going to be a completely urban area. The only thing we've got left is near Chadderton Park and beyond, where we've got our remaining green belt space. And what the plan proposed was that should be developed from the Stakehill Industrial Estate to come straight into the north side of Chadderton. So basically, it seems that the plan is to extinguish any green belt space left in Chadderton. And the plan doesn't then say, well, how do we develop, if you want, the leisure amenities, the ability for people in Chadderton to go to a green space and have a walk around, basically. And the answer is it doesn't, because it's a low priority in economic terms. All they look at is, we've got to have jobs. We'll put the extra jobs in Chadderton because there's a bit of space there. And yet they seem to have no idea that if you try and build warehouses on the land designated on the far side of Chadderton Heights, the slope of the land is 45 degrees. Now, I would look with great interest on how they're going to put a warehouse on land that slopes at that 45-degree angle. And the answer is they can't without destroying completely Chadderton Heights and levelling this all off. Well, they can't because they're not going that far over. Okay. So, I think it would have been better if they said, right, what can we do with the land in the north of Chadderton in order to develop it for leisure purposes, such as encouraging greater tree growth along that boundary.
Do you want to let Andy come back on that? You made a couple of points there. Do you make Andy come
listening carefully, and as I say, I'm still listening. This isn't a done deal. This process isn't over. There will be more phases of consultation, and evidence of the kind that you're pointing to around the viability of sites needs to be looked at as we carry on going through this process. I don't want to be taking any more green space than is strictly necessary, but there is a public interest in keeping Greenbelt, but there's also a public interest in creating new employment. And you can't minimise that, I don't think, in this borough. We do have plans for high quality jobs, not just warehousing. We've just signed off an industrial strategy with the government that is talking about bringing high value jobs into the north of Greater Manchester. So all of these things have to be balanced against each other, and somehow we have to come to a compromise here. And as I say, I'm prepared to listen, I'm prepared to look at what you're saying tonight, but equally there's no point in me sitting over here and saying, oh yes, we'll just do the easy thing, because in the end, if we don't have a spatial framework, the Greenbelt will be more at risk than if we actually do manage to agree on a spatial framework. That is the bottom line here. But yes, it's got to be fair to all communities, and I will listen to what you're saying and take a look again at the area concerned.
Any other questions on this issue of the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework? We've got one there, then one there. We'll take this lady here first, and then if you wait for the mic to come to you.
I'm just quickly picking up on one of the points that was made by the last person. With regard to pollution, what part of the question was concern the warehousing and the logistic companies that you want to set up there. And that would mean that there's lots of heavy good vehicles going in. It would also mean that there's lots of vans coming out, if, of course, you can let the warehousing, because we all know that they don't locate in heavily congested areas because the profit margins are so thin. But the question is, in your transport strategy, your own transport strategy, you talk about how high the levels of pollution are from vehicles, heavy goods vehicles going into warehousing sites. Now, how can you justify building warehouses in the middle of very heavily populated areas when your own strategy says that that is the case? How on earth do you hope it can ever be carbon neutral?
Again, it's a fair question. I don't make the assumption that it will be warehousing, though. Well, land zone for employment might have warehousing as its kind of obvious usage, but I am trying to raise the ambitions for the quality of employment across the north of the conurbation, and the industrial strategy has only been recently published, and I am talking to the leader of the council about how do we bring high quality jobs, advanced manufacturing, jobs in growth sectors of the economy. Let me just answer your point, because I'm going to come directly to your point. and your point is about traffic pollution, and let me answer it, you need to look at the spatial framework alongside the clean air plan. So, so if you have read that plan, you will see that we are proposing a clean air zone Greater Manchester wide, which will cover HGVs and vans, and that will cover the whole of your borough. So, well, I'm trying to answer your question.
Can we get you the mic? Sorry,
I don't think so.
People, if we can try and avoid that back and forth, because the other people can't hear you. But go ahead.
I just wanted to hone in on the question. Your transport strategy says explicitly that the levels of pollution created by heavy goods vehicles are at their greatest in the last few miles when they slow down. And they will slow down because, in particular, Chadderton, which I know, is heavily congested. So it's the pollution I'm interested in. How can you possibly hope to be carbon neutral when you're putting all that in the middle of a heavily populated area?
But that's what I'm saying to you. The proposal for the clean air zone deals with that question of the pollution. So if the vehicles are not compliant with regard to the emission standards, they will be fined for going in and out of that site. I mean, you're shaking your head, but that is what we are being... Well, it is, isn't it? Because there is cleaner engine technology that is coming through. And so the age of the vehicle, it'll have to be of a certain age. Otherwise, it will be non-compliant and therefore will attract a fine. So you do need to look at the spatial framework alongside the proposals for a clean air zone covering the whole of Greater Manchester.
Just one thing, then, are you going to update your transport strategy to reflect that? Because that's not what it says in your transport.
Quick answer to that, Andy.
Well, we're in the process of trying to agree the clean air zone with the government, and once we have agreed it, and then it will be updated. But this is a conversation that we're in the middle of with the government at the moment. But you do need to kind of take this on board, that the clean air zone will cover the whole of Greater Manchester, and there will then be restrictions on the age of vehicles that can go in and out of the sites that you're mentioning.
There was someone with a hand at the back. Yeah, a gentleman at the back there. Could you say your name when you say hello as well?
Yep. Hi, Andy. My name is Martin Emmett. I live in Chadderton, which seems to be a theme. Just really my question was, we went to the local consultation, speaking to the councillors and the planners. The issue that I have, or the question I have for you, is that, as I understood it, the government's policy was to put affordable housing for, I have an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old, for them to be able to have their own home or aspire to having their own home. How does that kind of sit with the plans that I've seen? And I appreciate what you say about the plans could change, that these properties that are going to be built are 3, 4, 5-bedroomed detached houses on a greenbelt area. How do you square that with the affordable housing scenario? To be honest, I couldn't afford them, never mind my 18-year-old and my 21-year-old.
The thing about affordable housing is that, that word affordable, well, what does it actually mean? If you're using affordability on a national test, it's skewed by London, basically. So on the government's definition of affordable, it isn't affordable to many people in Oldham. So, that is a problem. The second part of this is the government aren't, though they're talking about allowing more building of social housing, they aren't actually giving us the money or the borrowing freedom to do that. But having said all of that, we do have a plan in the spatial framework for around 200,000 new houses over the period. The Greater Manchester housing strategy that now has come out alongside it says that 50,000 of those should be truly affordable to a Greater Manchester definition, i.e. linked to wages here, not skewed by London. And of that 50,000, 30,000 will be for social rent. So that is the housing policy that we've now published ourselves as the 10 districts and the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I am not saying to you that they will all be on the site that you're worried about. What I am saying to you, that there is a headline commitment there to make a quarter of the homes that we're building truly affordable. And that's quite a big statement.
Why only a quarter?
It's just what we can afford, Dan. You know, there's no point us saying that we can build more homes than we've actually got the resources at the moment to do. So,
but why only of the 200,000? Why only 50? You said 50,000 of the 200,000 would be truly affordable. That's only 1 in 4. So 3/4 of the homes you're building would be deemed above that kind of definition of affordable for someone on a low income.
it's because they require a subsidy, don't they? And so we don't have the resources to commit to go beyond that. So it's a case of us making a realistic commitment, knowing the resources that we're likely to have at our disposal over that period. But to make a commitment to 50,000 is a big commitment.
Did you feel that answer your question, sir?
Sorry, I think I've got a few grey hairs, so I'm slightly cynical. I apologise. I see it that the plan that affects our particular area is a way of perhaps covering the fact that Oldham is not getting as much money as it used to from central government. So if you build 3, 4, 5 bedroomed houses on a very nice plot of land in a diminishing green belt, your income or your take from those building those houses on an annual basis will be a lot higher than houses that are needed by people who are perhaps not are a little less well off. And again, that's a very cynical point, but I think it's a more realistic point than what has just been given to us.
It's a challenging situation for everybody because we're under massive pressure from central government to build more homes, and genuinely we are. And yet they're not giving us the resources to make those homes as affordable as possible. So what we are doing is doing as much as we possibly can with what we have got. Now, you're entitled to be cynical. I can understand why you might be. All I can say to you is no one is going to love this process, are they? It's a difficult process to go about. We need homes, we need jobs, we need green space. We need all of those things, actually. And you can't say any one of them is necessarily the one that trumps all the others. We need all 3 of those things, and we need to get those things while keeping a balance as best we can within all communities. And we need a mix of housing. You know, we can't just have all one type of housing. It does need to be a mix. So it's a tough process. But as I said to the gentleman at the back before, I am still listening, and I'm sure that goes for the leader of the council as well. You know, we are trying to find the point of balance as best we can. But you've got to recognise we are not operating in ideal circumstances, and we don't have all of the support from central government that we feel we're entitled to. I'll give you one thing that's happened actually since we published the spatial framework, Dan. I went for quite a low figure in terms of the overall numbers of homes that we committed to build, so 201,000. It was the lower end of what we could do without the whole plan being ruled legally unsound. When we did that, the government immediately removed our housing deal, which was £50 million of funding to unlock brownfield sites across the city region, because they were trying to force us to build above the assessed housing need, because they had this manifesto commitment of 300 new homes across the country, 300,000 over the next few years. So they tried to force us to build more than we actually needed. We said we wouldn't do that. The minute we did that, they took away the funding to remediate brownfield sites. It just gives you a flavour of the kind of pressure that we're under. And obviously, if you take away funding to clean up brownfield sites, you're in a difficulty then as to what sites you can look as viable sites for housing.
Any final points on this before we move on? I'll take a couple of questions first, then we'll... So yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3. Try and get your questions as short as you can. There's lots of people want to speak. Gentleman at the back here.
Are you likely to buckle under...
Oh, wait for the mic. Sorry, I'm very bad at this.
Are you likely to buckle under government pressure in that regard, as regards the number of houses to be built, 201,000?
I can say to you tonight that I will not be increasing that number that I put in the draft of the spatial framework earlier this year. 201,000. As I say, it's had consequences because we've lost the housing deal, but I will not be increasing that number because I have my doubts anyway about the statistics that they were forcing us to use. Effectively, they're forcing us to use ONS statistics from 2014. A more recent projection started to bring the projections down. So I kind of feel that number that we've come to is probably somewhere in the right place. And I will not be buckling to any pressure to increase that number, no.
Question here, lady in the yellow top, just down the front here. And there's someone else at the back there with a mic hand up, I think.
When you said they're taking the money to away from developing the brownfield sites, why is that cost not being put onto the developers, seen as though this is developer-led?
Well, it's a good question. And in an ideal world, that's what should happen. But the truth of the matter is, the north of England has a lot of sites that are heavily contaminated. So I understand why this seems odd to people when they go around and they say to me, well, hang on a minute, why aren't we doing this site here? And why are they taking this green site there? The truth of the matter is, it's the clean-up costs of some of those sites. You know, they're huge, some of them. I represented Lee, as you may remember, for a long time. Some of those mining sites that we had were, tens of millions to clean up. In fact, one is being built on in Lee now that was the last coal mine to close in Lee. It took tens of millions of pounds from the government to clean up that one site. And that is the reason. They are not viable commercially on their own. So a developer would say, I'm just not interested. The clean-up costs are way beyond what we could spend and what we would get back in the sale of those homes. So in the end, a lot of the sites in Greater Manchester do need some form of public subsidy, the brownfield sites, if they're to come forward for development.
We've got the leader of Oldham Council here, Sean Fielding. Do you want to make all the points, Sean?
Yeah, thank you. Should I stand up?
Stand up, yeah, stand up. Yeah.
Thanks for the questions from the people from Chatterton. I did want to address some of the issues that have been raised, particularly in relation to Chatterton. And first of all, I want to say that the dialogue that I've had with the Chatterton Greenbelt campaigners has been really constructive and really helpful in informing the decisions that we're going to be submitting to the next round that will go out to consultation. And that's not true of everywhere, I have to say, but the relationship that we have had with the Chatterton Greenbelt campaigners has been really constructive. And I think that the council's really benefited from that. The point that was made around viability and demand for the kind of employment sites that we're trying to allocate on the Chatterton Greenbelt area, if there is not demand, then they simply won't be built. The point that has been made around, Stake Hill, I've seen that people have said that Stake Hill is part empty. This is not the council proposing to build these things. This is the council proposing to allocate some land on which employment uses could eventually come forward. So this is a 30-year, it's a plan over the next 2 decades where employment or housing uses may come forward. And the evidence for that is that there are housing sites currently allocated elsewhere in Oldham and employment sites that are currently undeveloped because there is either no demand or they are not viable. And it may be the case for many years with these. This is an allocation of land policy. I'm absolutely with you on the low wage, low skill issue. I'm more ambitious for Oldham than simply creating more low wage jobs in warehouses. And that's why I've fought at the CA for recognition in the local industrial strategy for uses around advanced manufacturing and materials to be built into the local industrial strategy so that as employment uses for some of these allocations come forward, those are the uses that we're looking at rather than a continuation of some of the warehousing uses that you've described. But the thing that I really wanted to stand up and kind of kill tonight, and I know that I'll never kill it, is the idea that we want to build big, expensive houses so that we can coin in the council tax at Oldham. The idea that we have to provide services to these houses that will ultimately be built. We have to provide school places, we have to sweep and light the streets, we have to provide doctors' places, we have to empty the bins. They still place a cost on council services, and what this is about providing the houses that we are calculated to need as we move forward. It's nothing about trying to generate increased income from the council, and I know that that's the thing that gets circulated quite a lot on social media, but it is categorically not the case. And I know that I won't be able to kill it tonight, but I just felt that I had to say that at this meeting because I know that it's been mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. No, over there.
Dan, do you mind if I say one last thing?
Go ahead.
I hear what's being said tonight and met colleagues from Royton before. I mean, without talking just specifically about this borough, if I could just say something about the process overall, I would like to reduce the Greenbelt take further from what it is in the current draft. What I need is evidence-based plans that would allow us to do that. So sites allocated that could come forward, densities perhaps increased in certain parts of the conurbation, or greater use of town centres. We've got the first mayoral development corporation in the country affecting a town centre. That's Stockport. We've got a plan coming forward there for 3,000 plus homes in Stockport. And that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in. Can we unlock more network rail sites across Greater Manchester to get some of this development into places that are closer to public transport? So I am in that market. I would like to reduce the Greenbelt take even further. But obviously we need to find evidence-based, credible ways of doing that. Otherwise, this plan will collapse at the first hurdle.
We've had half an hour on. If they're really quick points on the same issue, yeah, and then 1 minute, and then we'll move on. So it's a topic everyone's very interested in, but there's lots more to get through. So very quick point here, and down here.
Can I just touch on the evidence-based issue that you've just raised there? Everything needs to be evidence-based. I get that, but the evidence that you're using is actually out of date. So the out-of-date evidence actually isn't evidence-based, is it? Because we've got more recent, with more recent research that what is the point of funding that to have more up-to-date research, because everywhere is evidence-based and up-to-date, and we've actually had a plan with regards to the Opal passed because of out-of-date information. So how is it that one plan can be passed because we've got out-of-date information, but we're actually going to use out-of-date information for this plan?
It's a really good question. When those latest figures came out from the ONS, I said to the team at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, we now use those 2016 figures. And they will tell you that the plan was looking different once we started to use those figures. We have been effectively mandated by the government to use the 2014 figures. They say that the calculations that were done for the 2016 figures were wrong because it would have meant Cambridge, I think, demolishing homes because they said they got their projections wrong. Now, I don't know what the argument that went on between the government and the ONS was. What I do know is it's been made crystal clear to us that if we don't use the 2014 figures, they will intervene and make us to do it, as they have done to the Wirral. They've done that to Wirral Council. So that, I can understand, is frustrating to you, but it is to me as well.
Okay, let's move on, because that feels like a kind of relevant segue to the next question, to do with this battle between you and the government, which is about to change quite a bit. Not you, yet.
That's why something happened today. Have I missed something?
Is Ron Smith here? If he's not, I'll read out his question. Okay, so Ron Smith, who did submit this question, obviously not here, he said, with Boris Johnson being named the new Conservative Party leader, did you hear about that?
I heard something about it. Yeah.
And therefore the new Prime Minister tomorrow, how do you think this will affect devolution in Manchester, in Greater Manchester, he should have put, and more widely with the Northern Powerhouse? If a newly, he goes on to say, what impact does he think this will have on devolution and the Northern Powerhouse?
It's a really good question. I'd like to know what your view on that is. I hope you're in Westminster more than me these days, Dan. It's a troubling thing, though, isn't it, that about a quarter of the people who elected me to be Mayor of Greater Manchester have actually made this person our next Prime Minister. 90,000 people, is that right? I think predominantly from the south of England, I don't know, but of a certain age. It tells to me something about how broken our national political system is, to be honest, that this is basically what's happening. And as far as I can tell, Boris Johnson has never been much of a friend of the north of England. I can barely remember him saying anything about it other than negative things about it. So if he wants to unite the country, then I think he's got a big job on his hands. He's going to have to prove to people here that he does want to see the investment that we've been promised. If you're going to deliver a Northern Powerhouse, I'm very consistent about this. It means that we should get what London's had for the last 30 years, i.e. at the very front of the queue for all transport and infrastructure investment. That is what it means. And I think we're going to have to really challenge him with regard to whether or not there is a genuine commitment here to the north of England, because hitherto I've never seen it.
I'm intrigued. Just humour me. Show of hands. Who here would... Well, first of all, is there any Conservative Party members here tonight at all? If you were, you'd definitely not put your hand up. I get that. Is anyone here... Would anyone here, as of today, vote for Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister? Okay, so that's... Okay, we've got one. I definitely want to speak to you. Okay. Can we get a mic? Can we get a mic to this gentleman here in the middle? And if you've got a question to Andy with it, that would be great. Just humouring me for 5 minutes here. But it's the story of the day, right? And it's the thing that's going to... It's the man you're going to have to do business with the next year.
Well, like the lady said, it's about out of Boris and Hunt, 100% I would have voted for Boris.
Okay.
When I'm not a fan of Boris, but I'm not against him either. I'm indifferent towards him.
Give me pros and cons. What's good, what's bad?
He's random.
She'll be asking you this.
Well, he's random.
He's random.
He really is, isn't he?
Okay.
We don't know what he's going to... We don't know whether he's going to be...
Is that a good thing in a Prime Minister, do you think?
Well, you can't second guess him, can you?
That's true.
No, seriously, you don't know what you're going to do. You didn't know, Andy.
Ask you in a minute.
Did you know what the job was going to be like before you got in it?
This one?
Yeah. You had your idea, but the very day
question.
you got in it, I'm assuming you were thinking, now that the responsibility falls on you, it's different, isn't it?
Great question.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
We don't know.
It's tougher than I thought it would be, to be honest with you.
I'm not saying you can't do it, but you don't know until you're doing it.
It's tougher than I thought it would be.
Andy.
And I used a phrase when I stood for it that annoyed everybody. I said it's a cabinet-level job that requires cabinet-level experience, and I stand by that, actually. This job is quite similar in terms of the level of pressure that I felt when I was in the cabinet. So I had an idea, to be honest with you, what it would be like. I much prefer it, actually, to being in Westminster. Much prefer it, because we just have a proper discussion about the issues rather than all that nonsense that goes on down there. And, you know, it's more direct, it's real, it's a much better job, in my view, to do. But no, I think I remember seeing Gordon Brown go from where he was into the top job. And I think the same happened with Theresa May. The 360-degree pressure that comes with it, I think nothing quite prepares you for it. But the thing that you just said before, I think, doesn't give me confidence. Randomness is not a quality, I think, is well suited to this particular role, and particularly not now when the country is drifting dangerously into uncharted waters. But let me say, because I keep saying this, I am not in this role for the point scoring. I honestly don't care about it anymore. Genuinely, it's place for me. I'm here to try and do my best for you, for Oldham, for Greater Manchester. That's why I'm here. No one wants me to be sort of firing off sort of things and, you know, tit for tat and point scoring and all of that. So having kind of said something about Boris Johnson that perhaps isn't that favourable to him, that he isn't a friend of the North, well, I don't perceive him to be a friend of the North from what I've seen. I'm prepared to say, well, OK, well, you've got the benefit of the doubt here for a few weeks and months. So we're holding a convention of the North in September. That's business and political leaders from all parts of the north of England. First challenge to him, will you come to it? Will you come to it? And will you tell us what you're going to do about this promise of a northern powerhouse? And if he takes that up and comes and says, yeah, and I'm going to invest in northern powerhouse rail and all the other things that we're saying we believe are essential, then I'm prepared to work with him with an open mind, Dan. It gives me some encouragement that he's been a mayor before. So I think he understands the needs of cities and city regions, perhaps more than a pure Westminster politician. So I'm prepared to, you know, balance up the scorecard a bit here. But if he is going to unite this country, he's got to recognise that the north of England will not accept being treated in the same way that we've always been treated by the Conservative Party. They promised us this northern powerhouse, and unless they put meaning behind it, I think it's really going to damage people's trust in politics across the board in this country.
Any other question? I mean, it can be about Boris Johnson, but it can also be about the relationship.
He got in. He got in based on
You've got 10 seconds,
Brexit,
and I'm taking the mic off you.
That's how he got in.
Right, OK.
Well,
Forget everything
let's judge him on a few things as well, by the way. So the Chief Constable's here tonight. I've heard both of the candidates in this leadership election make commitments about the police. So let's judge them on that. There's a nod going on the front row here. Where's your commitment to community policing in our country, which we would all feel from a Greater Manchester level has gone way below what it should be in any decent society be allowed to go. What's he going to do about the homelessness on our street? I can't battle that on my own. We need help from central government. And all I can say to you, how it feels to be me in the last 2 years, it feels like to me this country's been drifting. We've just had a kind of absent government. They just haven't been there dealing with these bread and butter issues at all. And they've got to get their focus. Yes, deal with Brexit, but get your focus back on the basics as well.
Now he's in, he's now got 100 questions apart from Brexit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We've got the Chief Constable here from Greater Manchester Police. So, I mean, first of all, I can ask you a quick question. You can't answer it. No, please stand up.
Don't ask me if I'm going to vote for him, will you?
No, please stand up. Please stand up again. Two things. First thing on the commit, both. I mean, forget Jeremy Hunt now; it's not relevant. I mean, he may be Foreign Secretary still, but it might not be tomorrow. Boris Johnson has said he wants to put 20,000 more police officers on the streets. First of all, A, do you believe him? B, is that welcome? And secondly, how important do you think it is in your incredibly senior role, who deals with high levels of government all the time, that the character of a Prime Minister, because, I mean, the gentleman described him as random, there'll be far worse ways of describing Boris Johnson. Do you think character really matters, you personally dealing with the Prime Minister and a Home Secretary?
Let's take the easy ones first then. So the numbers, I mean, clearly, we've spoken many times about the 25% cut in officer numbers in Greater Manchester. So 2,000 less than we had 10 years ago. Actually, one of the things that's been really fantastic from a crime point of view in the debate between the two of them is that policing finally has been seriously on the agenda, and they seem to be recognising that you can't just keep cutting not only policing resources but other resources at a local level and then wonder why crime goes up, and particularly serious violent crime. So we've really welcomed the debate and the fact that they've wanted to engage with it, as the Home Secretary and the Police Minister have as well for the last year or so, to be quite honest. Do I believe them? Well, last week was Chiefs Council, so I was down in London with all the other chiefs from England and Wales. The Home Office were there, very senior people at the Home Office, and the comprehensive spending review that will have to come, whether it's a 1-year or a 3-year comprehensive spending review, that's what they're gearing up for, an uplift in police numbers. Now, our plea as chiefs was, that's brilliant, we absolutely want it, but you need the infrastructure to be able to bring people in, because all of that's been cut away as well. So how do you train them? How do you equip them? What's going to happen to magistrates' courts if we start pumping loads more people through for some of the offences that are no longer there? Because, we're down to 799 justices across Greater Manchester. They need 850 just to operate. So there's a whole range of things that have to come behind it, and the message was that they're taking all that into account and that the money will be asked for from the Treasury to make it happen. It won't happen overnight. This year, because of the support I've got from Andy, I'm able to recruit an additional 320 on top of the 500 that we stand still with people retiring. So 820 officers coming in. That's probably about my maximum. So Greater Manchester is about 6% of policing nationally, so if you take 20,000, it's about 1,200 officers maybe for us over the next 3 years. You've got to get them in, you've got to equip them, it's 20 weeks in the training school, it's 10 weeks with a tutor constable, all those things. So it will take time to repair what has happened, but yes, we absolutely want it. My plea back to senior politicians, and particularly Andy, he knows this better than most, is it can't just be about numbers though, because policing now is so complex, and particularly because of digital technology and how that's driving different aspects of crime and the forensics and everything that we have to do around it. There needs to be a balance in terms of capability that we grow as a service regionally and nationally, and not just about officers. I'm clearly not going to comment on Boris Johnson's character. Nice try, Dan, but I'm not that green. What I would say is I agree that randomness is perhaps not a quality that you want in a senior leader, whether that's a chief constable or a mayor.
Well, it works for Donald Trump in some ways, doesn't it? I mean, seriously. I mean, yeah, some people look at Donald Trump and say, I hate a lot about him, but I tell you what, the US economy is doing quite well, and no one can second guess him. People don't bully him around. Yeah, we're about to enter an EU negotiations.
It's still not a quality I would want to see in a senior leader. I mean, the one thing that I would say is that there are some really, really good advisors around senior politicians, and again, Andy will know that. I see it, they're colleagues of mine. It's people like me as senior chief constables, it's senior civil servants like Mark Sidwell and people like that, that will give them the advice that they need when it comes to the security of the country.
Thanks, Ian.
I see that the President of the United States has called him Britain's Trump tonight, hasn't he? So that's really going to fill us all with great hope for...
Have you got a microphone over you as well? We'll pass you a microphone. Say your name as well, just I like to know people's names.
My name is Valerie Leach. I'm a local councillor in Oldham. If we could characterise Boris Johnson as a libertarian, if nothing else, might we not be able to take advantage of that right now in pushing harder for more devolution?
Well, that's a really good question, actually, and I was hoping the conversation might go in this direction, because the problem in many ways with the discussion we've all just been having is the idea that Westminster is the be-all and end-all, and if it's not happening there, it's not really happening. And that's, I'm afraid, not Dan, but a lot of Dan's colleagues in the media still behave like that, that it's just what happens there, and actually everything else is kind of invisible, and no other place is capable of doing anything for itself. Well, I think we are proving that wrong here in Greater Manchester. Yesterday, Sean was there. We launched a good employment charter for Greater Manchester that is about giving people better paid work, more secure work, more flexible work. And before people think, oh, it's just another bit of paper, we're going to link it to public procurement. And we had a lot of big companies in the room saying, OK, we're ready to go on this journey with you. It's about making change happen in a different way. It's a tough one, but we are beginning to reduce the numbers of people sleeping rough around Greater Manchester by giving them somewhere to go. We are bringing through free bus travel for 16 to 18-year-olds in a couple of months. So we are making change happen. We can have a debate whether you think it's the right change or the wrong change, but this idea that it's all got to be about Westminster.
But isn't this a slight issue here? So I think a lot of people would agree with what you're saying, but let's go back, wind back 5 minutes ago. The lady in the yellow top there, forgive me, I forgot your name. You said, you raised a point about using out-of-date figures, right? And Andy said, look, I'd love to use new figures, but I can't. Why? Because the government are making me use them. So isn't there an issue here of when there is still that friction, because the government in many ways still hold the cards, and you're having to work to them, and therefore what you're saying is right, that you can push and you can shout louder, and you can certainly you can do, but there's still a hell of a lot that you're reliant on the government to release those powers for you to do things.
Yes, but that's Westminster at its worst, actually, and they was absolutely right to ask that question. You know, they're kind of trying to impose what they want on us, and then take away the money that we would need to try and build on more homes on brownfield. So, you know, they're kind of denying us the opportunity to do what I think most people would want us to be doing, and that is why people are so alienated, I think, from politics at a national level. But you could look at it in so many different ways in terms of the way they behave. You know, we have one policy made for London foisted on all of us. And I think if this country is to kind of come through this in a better place, more devolution, to let city regions like ours do more for ourselves is a big part of the answer. To rebalance the country from south to north is a big part of the answer. Lord Kerslake said recently that the UK is one of the most regionally unbalanced countries in the OECD and one of the most politically over-centralised. And clearly those two things are linked. We have an over-centralised, London-centric political system that has looked after London for decades and has left us with a very unequal country. And actually he compared it to the gap between West and East Germany in the mid-1990s, just after reunification. It is that major. So any Prime Minister coming in saying, yes, I want to bring the country back together, unless that involves putting the north of England at the very front of the queue for investment and more devolved power, then I'm afraid it's just hollow words.
Any other questions? Gentleman down here. If you wait 5 seconds for your microphone, it's coming to you very quickly. Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to say that I'm a taxi driver in Oldham, and you are proposing 4 categories. In each one you have proposed the taxis on the clean zone, but unfortunately the government is not going to give the funding to for these purposes. And also at the same time, you are proposing the black cabs, which is costing 60,000, which is out of our capacity. How you justify this proposal to the taxi driver in Oldham?
Well, it's interesting that you've raised that example, because it's actually another example of what I was just saying. So I was saying to the lady before who was raising about air pollution. The government last week mandated us to go faster implementing a clean air zone. It gave us funding for the cameras so that we can issue fines for everybody, but it refused to accept our bid for a clean taxi fund so we could help businesses like yours move from an older vehicle to a lower emissions vehicle. And that is exactly the kind of behaviour that makes us all so frustrated. And I went out there and said, you know, play fair on clean air, because that is the government, that's Westminster at its worst once again. But they've been getting away with this, and they do get away with it, because actually, I don't think, Dan, again, the Westminster media focuses enough on how Westminster treats local government. It is quite frankly shocking when you see it from, I saw it from the other eyes, and I probably didn't focus on it enough. When you see it from this vantage point, it is terrible. But when it comes to taxis, we want funding to help you raise the standard of your vehicles. We don't want it to cost you anything or put people out of a job. But yes, I'm going to be honest with you, I would like both cleaner taxis running across Greater Manchester, and I would like single standards applied across all 10 of our boroughs. And yes, a single colour for all taxis, black for hackneys and perhaps white or a different colour for all private hire. Why? Because I think that is the hallmark of a world-class city region. If you come in at Manchester Airport, you would expect to see what you would see at Paris or New York or wherever, i.e. a transport system that looks of a decent standard, that people know what quality the service is that they're getting. At the moment, we don't have that, and it's true of our buses as well. It's confusing, the variable standards of our transport system. So yes, working with colleagues from TFGM, we want to see a more standard policy across Greater Manchester for taxis, both in terms of the quality of the vehicle and indeed their emissions. But we don't want you to be left to pay for all of that. We want to help our taxi drivers rise to that new standard.
Is K for... Oh, sorry. Come back.
If you don't mind.
If you have the mic.
The thing is this one, that when we are working to improve the quality of the air pollution in Oldham, we are bringing the hybrid cars and also the other improvement in the cars. But the problem remains there is that if you are proposing the white cars to the private hires, they increase the price significantly, the private hires. And as I said to you earlier, the black cab is costing 60,000. Oldham is nowhere can afford that sort of luxury in the investment.
We're not mandating black cabs on anybody. We're just simply saying that there should be standards for both. So if you're going to get in a black cab, what is the standard of the vehicle in terms of its cleanliness, its age, the training of the driver, all of those things, and what is the standard of a private hire vehicle? At the moment, if someone gets into a cab in Greater Manchester, let's be honest, you've no idea sometimes what you're stepping into because of the variable standards. And some of them are registered in Wolverhampton and Sefton and all these other places. So people don't know at the moment what the standards are. And what we're saying is, let's have a Greater Manchester standard. And then I would say, as the Mayor, supporting my own taxi industry to the public, and use Greater Manchester registered taxis. Do not use any of these people who are coming in from outside. Use our local companies. That is what I would want to do. So we help you grow your business, but actually we also help you invest in your own vehicles.
Gentleman with his hand at the back there, and a gentleman here as well. You go at the back first. Wait for the mic. Yeah, you at the back in the white shirt. Wait for the mic.
Mayor Burnham, I'd like to know why you've excluded private cars from your proposals to reduce vehicle pollution in Greater Manchester, bearing in mind that...
Hold the mic to your mouth, sir.
Sorry?
Hold the mic to your mouth so we can hear you.
Okay, bearing in mind that young people are captive in this situation. They can't walk away from air pollution. Okay?
Yeah. Yes, I think I understand what you're saying, but the answer to your question is 80% of private cars, by the time we would introduce the clean air zone, would have been compliant anyway, because it's private cars bought after 2006. So by the time this thing would come in, 80% would already be compliant. And what we want to do is obviously go after the problem rather than go after people who perhaps have no alternative but to use their car and don't have good enough public transport. So it is a difficult one, but I am choosing to prioritise HGVs, light goods vehicles, buses and taxis. And as you've heard, that's difficult enough with the funding that we've got available. I'm not in a position, having been through that debate with the congestion charge 10 years ago, where I think we can come back and say, oh, yes, cars are included, but you don't have decent public transport to be able to kind of have an alternative to using the car. Because the vast majority are going to be compliant anyway, we think we need to focus on what the real problem is in terms of cleaning up our air.
Okay, do you want to make a very quick point back and then we'll pass?
Just going off at a tangent, in Oldham, I don't see any effort to reduce vehicle pollution. I do a lot of walking, cycling. There's legislation in place which Oldham Council could invoke, the engine idling legislation. I don't see any of that. I see buses parked in West Street pumping out pollution. You know, I don't see anything being done to try and educate drivers in switching off their engines when they're stationary.
Yeah,
felt like a statement rather than a question. So
it did, but just let me say quickly.
Gentleman in the yellow here.
We are trying to change our buses too, you know, and we're going to go through a process of requiring higher standard vehicles that will have to be cleaner vehicles. On other things happening here, well, Sean and I are working on investing in cycling and walking infrastructure through the Challenge Fund I've set up under Chris Boardman. So there is actually stuff going on here in Oldham, and we could give you more details on that.
Gentleman in the yellow.
Okay, cheers, thanks. Thanks, Andy. Jeremy Sutcliffe, 73-year-old Oldham resident, and I realise my life is cut short by 5 years by the pollution, but I want to get back to the London centricism. Now, you've used the W word, Westminster, 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 but I've also heard you say things which seem to put part of the blame on Whitehall and the dead hand of the civil service. Now, to what extent is Whitehall trapped by the civil service? How much of a Jim Hacker situation have we got out of that?
Well, thanks, Jeremy. It's both, actually. It's Westminster and Whitehall that are the problem. And let me give you a direct example of how I know that Whitehall's part of the problem. I was Chief Secretary to the Treasury just over a decade ago, and I had to look at infrastructure spending across the country, and I asked the question, why is it so heavily focused on London and the South East? Because I was trying to change that. And the answer is the Treasury has what's called the Green Book, and when they assess projects that are bidding for funding, they prioritise schemes that will return more money back to the UK economy in a shorter time frame. So the schemes that score the highest are the schemes that are already in the parts of the country that have the strongest economy, effectively, i.e. inside the M25. That is the national policy of the UK Treasury. And that's why it's no coincidence when there's a pot of funding that it constantly gets sucked into London and the South East. And while Europe may not be popular in the newspapers, let me tell you something that Europe did that the Treasury never did. And that is, they used a social case for investment when it came to European structural funds. So they did the opposite thing to the UK Treasury. And I think as we leave Europe, if we leave Europe, the Treasury is going to have to change the way it allocates infrastructure spending across the UK. Otherwise, things will get even worse and there'll be an even bigger north-south divide than there was when we were in Europe.
Just very quickly, I picked you up there. You said then, when we leave Europe, if we leave.
Well,
what did you mean by if?
Well, I honestly don't know what the next few months hold. I mean, does anybody, Dan, know what the next few months hold? I'm one of those who said that we should honour the referendum. And I still say that now, as difficult as that is to hear for some people.
But you have also said that if no deal was the position of the government, so leave without a deal,
I think
that you would back a second referendum.
As we sit here tonight, I think the prospect of a no-deal exit from Europe has got a lot more likely today, a lot more likely. And if you listen to what people are saying about that with regard to supply of medicines, this isn't Project Fear, this is the reality. I don't think Ian talked about, politicians who use their judgment, and I don't think any UK politician should be countenancing the possibility of a no-deal exit from Europe. That would be to gamble with people's lives and their health, and their security, in my view.
And if Boris Johnson just kind of continued on down that road, pushing for a no deal, leaving without a deal on October the 31st, are you saying let's go back to the people, a second referendum to try and stop that?
I still believe, Dan, that it would be in the best interest of the country to leave in a safe way, i.e. a Norway-style deal or something. Because we could leave and then carry on having about whether we wanted to drift further away from Europe. Just respect the referendum is what I would say, is that's in the interests of democracy in this country and in the interests of the social fabric. But if that isn't going to happen, if we are going to be taken to a no deal, to answer your question, at that point I would fully back a second referendum. And I'm sorry if some people in the room don't support that, but I can only take my judgment as to what is best for the people of Greater Manchester. And I think a no-deal exit would be to expose the risk of genuine chaos across people's lives, and I would never be prepared to put my name to it.
Let's just spend 1 minute on Brexit. All our lives regardless, just 1 minute. Again, I think show of hands is a really quick way of getting a feel of a room. Who is worried about the idea of leaving the European Union, crashing out, no deal, leaving October the 31st? Who's worried about that? Okay, and who's thinks that's what we should do, that's the right approach? Okay, so the majority. Anyone want to keep the hand up who is worried about it, who's got a real concern about leaving without a deal? And any question? Gentleman at the back and gentleman down here as well. If it involves a question to Andy as well, that's a bonus.
Again,
you spoke before.
Yes, yeah, I'm hogging the mic. I think, in my view, it's not really our choice. For all the posturing, we seem to be getting nowhere. Europe have said the deal on the table is the deal, accept it or walk away. I can't see our politicians, no offence, although you're the mayor, so it doesn't really matter. But I can't see
recovering MP, I think.
Our politicians couldn't tell you which way is up, in my opinion, in some instances.
Okay.
And this will run and run and run, and at the end, it will be potentially up to Europe to turn around and say, either stay or just bugger off.
We got a gentleman down here with the mic with the gentleman down here, sorry. I'm not going to keep you on Brexit, I promise.
Andy, good to see you. My name is Umesh, I'm a pediatrician. I have serious concern for children's health if we have no deal, because of the medicine we use in children, and that is my biggest worry. No deal is no good for anybody. I think either we have to have a good deal, or I think we've got to postpone and make sure Europe agrees with something. Because I'm seriously concerned about the medicines for children, cancer, and many other things.
Did you say you're a pediatrician?
That's right, yeah.
Practicing?
Yeah.
And so you're saying that a no deal you're for medical supplies?
Absolutely. If you look at all the doctors, I've attended probably 22 meetings. I'm very seriously concerned if there is no deal, the medicine which we export from Europe, it has got a huge implication for cancer patients, for children, and everybody.
I mean, I hear that, and there's one thing a politician saying something, it's a different thing a doctor saying something, or indeed, I don't know what the Chief Constable would say about security, because last time I spoke to the Chief Constable about this, there still wasn't enough clarity about cooperation on issues like terrorism with other European countries. But I would just say to people who did put their hand up to say that you would sort of be okay with a no-deal Brexit or no-deal exit from Europe. I think you're almost certainly, if nothing else cuts ice with you around security or all these other things, I think we are absolutely signing up to the breakup of the UK. I think if that happens, you've got a hard border in Ireland. You've got Scotland, I think, who will absolutely be ready to go at that point. So what I find really odd about Boris Johnson and some of the people kind of linked to him is that these are meant to be unionists, and yet they're advocating no deal. And no deal for me is actually the breakup of the union, and I cannot get my head round how they're going to square that circle. The Conservative and Unionist Party, under his leadership, could be the party that breaks the United Kingdom. And I don't think that's an idle threat. I think that will happen if we leave with no deal.
Question. Stand up first.
Yeah. Really quickly on security, particularly policing security. So at the moment we have European arrest warrants. We can share biometric data in seconds across Europe. If somebody goes missing, they're circulated on the police national computer. It's automatically uploaded across Europe. We lose all of that with no deal. Now, whilst there are contingencies being put in place, they are all completely suboptimal to what we currently have. And that, for me, creates a risk. And people say, well, that's easy. You will negotiate a bilateral agreement with the other countries in Europe to be able to bring people back under arrest warrants, etc. German law, for example, German domestic law does not allow the negotiation of bilateral agreements because they're so tied into European law. So whilst we can put contingencies in place, they are completely suboptimal to what we've got, and that creates a safety and a security risk for us.
I want to move on from Brexit. We've got a couple of questions from people who submitted them who hopefully are here. If they're not, then I'll read their questions out. Is Kay Faulkner here? No? She actually sent 2 questions in, so I'll link them together. It's on transport, which is slightly back to where we were, and I can kind of tenuously link it to Boris Johnson to continue the theme of the night. One question here is, when will we get an Oyster-style transport in Greater Manchester? And then linked to that, second question on transport is HS3 or Northern Powerhouse Rail a possibility? And I'm linking that to Boris Johnson because he's talked about looking at HS2 and saying he likes the idea of HS3 about an east-west connection, but he's not as keen on HS2. Can you have HS3 with HS2?
So on the first question, I hope that we would have an Oyster-style scheme covering tram and bus within 3 to 4 years. So we have gone contactless on Metrolink in the last couple of weeks. Earlier this year, we went zonal on Metrolink. Those are the foundations of a London-style system. And what we are trying to do here is build out the Metrolink principles to the rest of our transport system. What I want in that time frame of 3 to 4 years is a reformed bus system working within that same structure. So the London principle being, if you get on a bus and then you get on the underground, it carries on monitoring all bits of your journey and it doesn't charge you more than a daily cap. If you try and do that here, get on a bus and then get on the Metrolink, you'll carry on paying as if you're a new customer every time you hit a new mode of transport. And that is the big change, Dan, that we need here. We need a system that creates a financial incentive to use public transport over the car. And actually, that's the best answer I can give to the gentleman who was saying about why not include private cars. At the moment, we don't have a public transport system that is fair to people in what it tries to charge them for their journey. The way the buses are structured, they try and kind of trap you as a bus customer, if I can put it that way. So a single journey is very expensive. They don't want you just to take a casual single journey. What they want is to try and make you buy a weekly. They want to compete with Metrolink, effectively. What we need is a system that works to a very different principle. It's £1.50 for a bus journey in London. It can be £4 here. We need the same system that sees all of your travel and applies a daily cap across all of it. And so in the end, we're making an argument too to the government to bring commuter rail within this system as well. We want to do what happened here to the rest of the system. Bob Morris from TFGM and I went up on the Metrolink line up to Oldham from Victoria a couple of weeks ago. And we wanted to show to the man who's running the government's review of rail franchising what can be done if you turn over rail lines to Metrolink. The rail line that serves your community had about 1 million passengers when it was a rail line and it had a public subsidy. Today it has no public subsidy and it carries 6 million passengers from Rochdale and Oldham into Manchester. And we're saying turn more of the rail network yellow and then let us build out a London-style transport system. On the second question, Dan...
Before I move on to the second question, any question on that topic? Because I can come back, we can come back to HS3. Question at the back there, and a question here.
In various cities in Britain, if you go to the bus stop, it will tell you, as they do with the metro, when the next bus is arriving. Is the fact that we haven't got this in Greater Manchester in that it would provide an embarrassment for the bus companies, or what? Thank you.
Well, it's very hard to create that open, structured, regulated system in the current framework that we have. When deregulation happened here in the mid-1980s, we kind of lost the ability to compel, if you like, in terms of saying, this is what all companies should do. This is the fares you should charge. These are the routes you should go. This is the public information you need to display. And we've been kind of dealing with the consequences of effectively an unregulated system for 30 years. Bus usage has pretty much gone down every year since the mid-1980s in Greater Manchester. And this is why the assessment that the Transport for Greater Manchester did recently recommends franchising on the London model as the best way forward for us. We've got certain kind of stages to go through to test that recommendation, but that is what's being proposed, so that we can have a kind of standardised approach to public information, fares and all the rest of it. And, you know, I think the bus companies are saying they are prepared to put more information out there, but it's still not really happened in a way that we would consider to be acceptable. So that's, in many ways, you've made an argument for why we need change in the way we're running the buses here.
Just want to have the hand up at the back on that, yeah.
Hi, I just wondered why we're not making public transport free for all young people in education. You've got children travelling to school that are buying a weekly bus pass. Families might have 2 or 3 children in school, could be paying 15 to like £22.50 a week in getting their children to school. You know, it just doesn't seem fair that they would have to pay to go to school.
Well, I absolutely hear where you're coming from. The reason why is I just don't have a budget for that. And Greater Manchester doesn't have a budget for that. London, again, I'm afraid, has had heavily subsidised transport system for decades. And we just don't get the same funding that they get. So if you look down there, they've got cheaper fares, better concessionary schemes, and it's really frustrating. And actually, that is, if you want to look at the north-south divide, that is the cost of public transport, I would say, is probably the biggest everyday example of the north-south divide in our country.
When you make these points to them, what's their response? Whether it's a government minister or the civil service or whoever it is you're dealing with on that day, what's their response when you make these points?
Honestly, Dan, I don't think they've got any idea how much it costs to travel by bus in Greater Manchester. They've got no kind of connection with that.
So it's a disconnect?
There's a disconnect. I don't think any minister in the government, and I'd probably say any MP on pretty much all sides of the house, have actually travelled on a bus out of London anytime recently. So I just don't think they know how much it costs. Many of them just don't. And consequently, they don't fix it. I would do it if, you know, the trend across Europe is to go to heavily subsidised public transport or even free public transport. That's a good economic policy because it connects people to jobs. It's a good environmental policy for the reasons everybody's been given tonight. It's a good social policy because it gets people out and about. It's why I'm moving to the free bus travel for 16 to 18s, but that's all I can afford given the funds I've got at my disposal. But I think, you know, if I could in an ideal world, I would. But, you know, the funding just isn't there at the moment.
Back to Kay Faulkner's other question, which was, is HS3 a possibility?
Well, yes, I think it is, Dan. I think it's got higher levels of public support possibly than HS2. But the mistake people make is to set HS2 up as a sort of a rival to HS3, or Northern Powerhouse Rail as we call it. In the end, I think these are one and the same scheme. The infrastructure for HS2 will basically create the backbone of Northern Powerhouse Rail. it will make it much more likely to happen. And the truth of the matter is, I think we need both. HS2 is needed because the M6 is pretty much full, the West Coast Main Line is pretty much full, so north-south is heavily congested. East-west connectivity we know is needed. But the question is not whether HS3 is a possibility, because I think it is a genuine possibility now. The question is, how will they build it? The current proposal is to build it as a surface station at Piccadilly. It's a cheap option, basically. They're trying to make it come in on the surface, and they're trying to make the trains go in and then turn around and come out like that. And we've said the only way, actually, you can deal with the central Manchester rail capacity issue is to tunnel underground and make it a through station. And people may have seen some of my comments in the MEN to that effect recently. Manchester's problem is, again, they're trying to do it on the cheap. Everything comes in on the surface in Manchester, everything. So all the rail is on the surface, all the trams are on the surface. Any other European city of this size would now be tunnelling underneath and would be building extra capacity under the streets. And I'm never, as your mayor, going to settle for second best. I'm never just going to get what I can. I'm going to argue as much as I can for what I think we deserve and what a northern powerhouse means in practice. Because they come and make the glib statement, you've got to live by what it means. And that for us means massive investment in our rail and transport system, because it's honestly nowhere near good enough at the moment.
But Boris Johnson said he's no fan of, I'll come to a question in a sec. Boris Johnson said he's no fan of HS2. He's looking to some kind of review. It looks like there's maybe some sort of review into HS2 to look at its rising costs, because the costs are going up and up each time it's looked at again, it seems. Will you be pressing, whenever you see him, that HS2 has to happen, partly because without it you can't have HS3? Is that the point you'll make to him?
So he said he'll review it, so he's not said he'll scrap it.
Yeah.
And when I see him, as I hope I will, in the next few days or weeks, I would hope, I will say this very directly to him, Dan. I think we've got some common cause, actually, and that is, let's scrap the third runway at Heathrow. Because that is a proposal which is based on what I was saying to the lady before about, the gentleman before about the Treasury, Jeremy. It's basically a scheme that comes out of the mentality that you give more and more and more and more and more to London and the South East. Because if you build a third runway at Heathrow, you're going to have a lot of knock-on road and rail capacity to serve that even bigger expanded airport. And then if we're going anywhere, we'll all have to get on a connecting flight down from Manchester to Heathrow, change, and then, that isn't environmentally friendly at all. In fact, if we're going to have domestic flights to service Heathrow, what I will say to him is scrap that third runway, build HS2 through Birmingham Airport and Manchester Airport, and start to rebalance this country properly. That is what I will say. And as I understand it, he's against the third runway. So maybe there is something to build on there.
Any questions on this topic? Okay. Question down here? Maybe we'll move on to the final question.
Hello, I'm Steph. Just to go back slightly to the franchising powers. So we've already heard from Stagecoach that they're not too happy about the fact that you might be kind of using those franchising powers that you've got as a Metro Mayor. How much pushback would you be willing to give to the threats of suing? For example, I know that in the North East, they also looked down the franchising route and basically shut that down as an option through being scared of being sued. So how willing are you to push back to the commercial operators?
At the end of the day, I'm going to do what's right by the public of Greater Manchester. What I have at the moment is an assessment from TFGM that says to me, franchising is the best way you can build a London-style transport system in this city, region, in the next few years. And that's that system I was describing, where, we have a system that allows people to travel across the different modes in an integrated ticketing system. So, unless that advice changes, I'm not going to be deflected by any threats, to be honest. I mean, there was a threat of legal action the next day after I'd kind of made public the assessment. I'm going to do what I think is right by the people of Greater Manchester. And as I say, I don't think you've got the transport system that you deserve. And I know, actually, I mean, homelessness is a personal priority, but if I look at the big picture, I think transport is the big shared challenge that we've all got together. The city region is brilliant in so many ways, but we haven't yet got a transport system that's up to the standard of what we would aspire to be in everything else. So I'm not going to be thrown off course by threats, definitely not. I'm going to do what's right. And, you know, at the moment, what I'm being told is right is to move towards a franchise system. But as I say, you know, that is an assessment at the moment, and it's got to go through stages of consultation and other things before any final decision.
Is Sally Bonney here? Sally? Perfect. Question from Sally. It's the final question, and we'll have a couple of supplementary ones from here.
Morning. Sorry, fell. I'm not Sally. She couldn't be here tonight, but I'm Amy, and Sally founded Inspire Women Oldham, a women's centre. But I'm here with Libby from Young Women Changemakers. We're a group of who campaign. Young women passionate about campaigning in Oldham. And our question is, what are you doing with devolved powers to enable young women who are overlooked to have a say in decisions that impact their lives?
Well, that's a really fair challenge to throw out. And as I was saying last year, when we had 100 years of the suffragettes, and I've not seen the statue of Annie Kenney actually, but that is a fantastic. Is it nearby? I should take a walk before I go home. I mean, you know, that is a powerful statement, isn't it, to the young women of Oldham, in terms of what we want for them in terms of empowerment. And actually, one of the things I reflected upon, have we really come as far as we should have done since women got the right to vote 100 years ago, given you look at the inequality that still is there, particularly in terms of pay, across all sectors of the economy? So what am I doing is the question. We move very quickly to a gender-balanced combined authority because I feel in this day and age it is right that we have balanced representation from all 10 of our boroughs, and we do have that at our combined authority meetings. But on particularly young women, we've got a gender-balanced youth combined authority. And we were talking about young people's travel before. The Youth Combined Authority are actually designing the R-Pass policy, which is about giving them bus travel linked to opportunities to get free entry to theatres and other activities. And that is being driven by young people and young women here in Greater Manchester. So I want devolution genuinely to be about breaking out of this kind of very, very broken political structure that we have, and use this power that we've got at our level to empower people in our communities. But I recognise we've got further to go on that. But it's a really fair challenge, and you should keep challenging me on it, because you know this should be a game changer for young people growing up here, and particularly young women.
You're the expert here, so give us a couple of ideas what you think on this.
I knew you were going to ask that.
That's
and
all right.
That's why I'm gutted Sally's not here. I think she's watching it live on Twitter.
Sally stitched you up.
So Sally, yeah. I just want to say that I was, you know, I was involved in the unveiling of the Annie Kenney statue. I played Annie in a BBC Suffragettes documentary.
Yeah.
And knew nothing about her. So I'm from Oldham, born and bred. Last February was the first time I'd heard anything about Annie Kenney. The platform in which she stands was originally meant for Winston Churchill. And then Jim McMahon said, I'm not having a statue of Winston Churchill without Annie Kenney. Sally Bonney, who founded Inspire Women, was going to call it the Annie Kenney Centre. And I think what they're after is, I'm trying to say this on behalf of a woman who has been working in the sector for 25 years, who wants to empower and uplift women and give them strength and bring them together. So it's generic health services do not work for women, do not work for all women. You see the articles in The Guardian, a world built for men, that drug trials are done for men, you know, airbags and stuff like that are based on men's height and sizes, things like that. And what we want in Oldham is to create a platform where women with lived experience get to talk to influencers and decision makers like yourselves, and just have that understanding between the both of us, because sometimes services get rolled out that don't work for people. And then I don't know what the follow-up program is for that, whether there's a review system, but yeah, we're looking for, they're calling it a gender-informed platform, but I think we just want to amplify the voices of women in Oldham. But what we need to do first is reach out to the women who are overlooked. We are an incredibly diverse city. I'm half Polish. I'm proud to be part of this incredible, in this incredible town. But we need to come together and work together for better, I think.
Isn't one of the advantages of a devolved model like this is that you are closer to the people you represent, and therefore you can, at the very least, listen to those statements, those comments, those concerns in a way that perhaps it can't happen at a national level.
I think so, Dan. That is the opportunity, and Sean and I and the other leaders always use a phrase that we mean it when we say it: do with, don't do to. We do say that all the time, and we try very, very hard to build our policies from the bottom up, bringing in all voices. I've just been today at a meeting of our disabled people's panel. Second meeting, we're giving disabled people a voice at the top of the combined authority. I've mentioned the youth combined authority. We've got an LGBT panel. I want a faith and race equality panel. What I'm trying to do slowly is bring in all voices, often excluded from the political debate, into our discussions, into our decision making. But some of the policies we're bringing through, I think, will empower women. So the Good Employment Charter, again, just to think about that for a second, have a look at it, because the policies in there around flexible work, equal pay, could empower women who are often, sadly, still in the most insecure, lowest paid work. We've done a big change to social care, Dan, and this is something that the national media haven't really clocked yet, but we've all but eradicated 15-minute care visits in Greater Manchester. Now, they were often given to women who were the recipients of that care, but the carers also were low-paid women, by and large. And we are working to get rid of that culture where we are basically treating people who are caring for other people's parents lower than people working in retail or bar work. We're trying to change that. So it isn't just sort of the headline things we're doing for women. If you look at some of our policies, I think they could have a really dramatically empowering effect on women. And, the promise of free bus travel to all 16 to 18-year-olds, I want that to empower every young person growing up here in terms of what they may be able to get on and do with their life. So I'm all about everything that you're saying, and it won't be achieved overnight. But I think devolution is beginning to work in Greater Manchester. I think it is beginning to bring through some different thinking, different ways of doing things. Okay. And the fact that we've had this discussion tonight hopefully is some evidence of that as well.
We've got one final question down here. Was it here? This man's been pointing at me for about 5 minutes. I do apologise. I feel very bad if I don't. We've got 3 or 4 minutes. If we can try and fit a couple of questions in, we will.
I'm the chair of a very busy community centre, and I think it connects, it segues into from the women's issue to what I'm going to say. We're in a fractured world fraught by insecurity and mental illness. Using community centres can deliver in spades in helping bring people together. Culture, identity, and community spirit should be a 3-card trick. It should be something we're looking to develop in local communities. What I think is key is to start thinking about social care and health, yes, but youth and community centres can be put in the same bracket. And I would advocate, as a sort of Labour Party policy, if we could get it, is that effectively we can have health money that enables people to attend community centres who otherwise couldn't afford the activities that take place in them. Right. I would also advocate that GPs get training for actually referring people on the social prescription agenda to attend community centres. Yeah,
I think so. Do you want to answer that, or are you happy with just taking it as a kind of bit of advice?
Do you want to take one final question from the gentleman on his hand there? I mean, I can answer it absolutely, because I agree wholeheartedly with you.
30 seconds.
We shouldn't put up any more with a situation where the health service just hands out medication like Smarties. There was a really strong campaigner from Oldham. I'm trying to get his name wrong now. Barry, have I got his name? Barry Haslam. who campaigned against over-prescription of what are called benzos. And I always supported him, because if actually we did do more social prescribing, the health service supporting physical activity, community activity, art therapy, working community centres, I 100% support that. As well as, though, getting more positive opportunities for young people. So the R-Pass will open up sports clubs, theatres. You know, Sean and I were in Oldham Coliseum recently launching it. It's all about that. And we do have to build that sense of community and common identity.
Last question, because you've got 1 minute, and if you've got your hand up, we can speak to Andy afterwards. Man at the back here.
Yeah, thanks. I know one of Andy's passions is homelessness across Greater Manchester, and they work really hard in this issue. I just wondered where you're up to with kind of fully and properly funding ABEN 2. Yeah. So, because it's an issue very much that's alive in our own borough.
Yeah.
Final answer.
So, yeah, I'll try and get this one to the point. So ABEN, for those who don't know, is called A Bed Every Night. And we are the only city region in the country that is seeking to open enough places every night to give every person sleeping rough somewhere to go. Tonight, there are about 330 people in a bed every night across Greater Manchester. And the commitment we are making, supported by Ian and Greater Manchester Police, supported by the NHS, by our councils, but yet also supported by voluntary donations. And I continue to donate 15% of my salary every month, as I said I would do, and I will always do that for as long as I'm mayor. We are building funds to be able to run a bed every night into the future. So the commitment I can give to you tonight is a bed every night is funded until the end of June 2020 in Greater Manchester. And that means the shelters will be open for the next 11 or so months. And alongside of it, we're running Housing First, which is giving people supported housing options coming out of the shelters.
Can I just say that in Oldham, for whatever reason, there is no shelter. The reason that seems to be that the funding is not there for that shelter to be active, so there's no shelter in Oldham tonight, so there are people on the street in Oldham tonight. So can you just kind of explain how that, particularly with Oldham Council represented, talk to them as much as talk to me?
Well, I think we've been working, Sean made us aware of those issues, and we've been working on those issues to resolve them. And if they've not been resolved right now, they will be quite soon. And I'll be honest with you, we're trying to do something that is difficult, because I'm trying to get everybody together to keep a bed every night going. And there was a bit of a gap between the first phase of a bed every night and the second phase coming in. So in certain places, some of the arrangements kind of went on hold for a bit, and I think that was possibly the case here. But as I know, because I speak to Sean about it, we are all completely committed to this drive to end the need for rough sleeping across Greater Manchester. As I say, it's absolutely the top of my personal priorities. I don't believe anybody in this country should be forced to sleep on our streets. I think it's a source of national shame that people are dying on British streets, and we saw that in an article in the Manchester Evening News again today. If I'm re-elected as mayor, I can promise you this will remain at the very top of my personal priorities. I will keep going at this until other places wake up and do the same. We are wealthy enough as a country. No matter all the issues we've discussed tonight, we should still be putting a roof over every head every night of the week. And as long as I'm the mayor of Greater Manchester, I can promise you that will be absolutely what I'm trying to do every single day I'm in this job.
Super. I'm gonna hold it. If you want to speak to Andy, Andy and Sean after, I absolutely think asking questions is great, but we're past 9 o'clock. Look, thanks so much for you all for coming. Thanks for submitting your questions. I know there's been a slight issue for those watching online with a streaming issue, so if you've put your questions in and I haven't read them, it's because I haven't got them. So thanks for watching online. Thanks for coming here tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm going to leave the last word to Andy.
Yeah,
as ever.
As ever, but it's really just on behalf of everybody here to thank you, because it was a really big day in Westminster today, as we've all been discussing. And Dan had a commitment to come here and do this for us tonight. He is a journalist that kind of emerged in our region, but has gone on to the national stage now. But being somebody who's true to this region, he came back here tonight, he drove all the way up, and he's driving back down again tonight. And I think that tells you a lot. When you see this man on ITV News in the future, just remember that he did that. And remember that this is a man who is a great friend of the North West.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Cheers. Thanks, Andy.